You're listening to the Patriot Nation Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Patriot Nation podcast. I'm Matt St. Jean. We got a little bit of a weird schedule this week. Pat is on vacation. He's enjoying a little time off before training camp. And I've had, my schedule moving around a little bit too. So we got a Wednesday night episode of the show for you guys. And then I'll be back again tomorrow night. We've got a great interview. So make sure you tune in tomorrow night. But tonight, today, July 17th, coming to you live 1 week. Yes. Just 1 week until Patriots training camp. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about some other NFL news on tonight's episode. But just remember, this podcast is sponsored by Prize Picks and Game Time. Go use code CLNS in either spot. We'll have more on that later in the show. But let's start with probably the biggest news in the NFL this week. There's been a lot of rumors around this all offseason long. It feels like we've kind of been building to this point out in the Bay Area. The defending NFC champions, their star wide receiver Brandon Ayuk officially requested a trade. This has been kind of in the works for a while now. Deebo Samuel had also requested a trade previously. They drafted Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver out of Florida, in the first round. So clearly the 49ers kind of anticipating this. So, this is, I don't think a shock to anyone the way this has gone. Brandon Ayuk is entering the last year of his deal. This is his fifth-year option as a former first-round pick, a guy who has really blossomed in that Kyle Shanahan offense as a do-it-all number one receiver. So we're going to talk a little bit here about the 49ers, what this means for them, what Brandon Ayuk is, and then potentially, what things could look like for the Patriots if they are interested, which it sounds like they are. So Ayuk out of Arizona State actually played with Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. We all know New England's history with receivers from that school, but this is a guy who, came out strong in his rookie year, had about 750 yards receiving as a rookie, and that was with only playing in 12 games that season. So averaging 62 yards per game as a rookie, which is pretty good. Right off the bat, playing pretty well there as a rookie. And then he's only built on it, increasing the total to 826 yards the year after. Then he surpasses the 1,000-yard mark in 2022. In this past season, almost over 1,300 receiving yards, throw in, 7 touchdowns. And he was the guy that made this. I can't say he made the offense work with all the other things that they have going on in San Francisco. But he's a huge key piece for this offense. A lot of that has to do with his ability to line up in multiple spots on the field. So he can be a dominant X receiver. About 3/4 of his snaps came from out wide. He can beat press, and he can be a deep threat from that area of the field. But you can move him around. You can put him in the slot. We like to see, you see that all the time with the San Francisco offense in the Super Bowl. They like to do cut splits. They call it tight splits, you'll hear, meaning that they're going to bring all of their receivers close to the ball and condense that formation as much as possible. And he's very comfortable from there, too. Routes with a two-way go, he can dominate on those. So, Ayuk is an elite receiver. And, one of the things that really stands out with him when you watch him play is his hands. Brandon Ayuk does not drop the ball very often. He's got a huge catch radius. He's a big receiver out there. Don't forget about that. It's listed at just 6 feet tall. He's got a nice big wingspan. He plays a lot bigger than that. Physical, he'll get after it in the run game. If you go back to the start of, I believe it was the 2022 season, in week 1 in the game in Pittsburgh. This might have been this past season, actually. I think it was this past season, now that I'm saying it out loud, where there's a great rep of him just blocking somebody basically the length of the field, which we all know that's an easy way to win over a coaching staff, is to get involved in the dirty work in the running game. And he has been excellent with that. So for San Francisco, they're kind of a cap crunch right here. It's going to be very difficult for them to keep all of these receivers, all of these weapons around. They signed Christian McCaffrey to a contract. They have George Kittle under contract. They have Deebo Samuel under contract. And you got one more year with Brandon Ayuk. So how do you approach this? From my perspective, the right way to handle it for San Francisco is to try to move Deebo Samuel and to try to lock up Brandon Ayuk for as long as you can. Deebo Samuel is an elite playmaker, an incredible threat with the ball in his hands, somebody who has had an injury history in the NFL, somebody who is not necessarily the best separator against man coverage. And he's a great player, but if you can only keep one of these two, I'm going to take the younger guy without the injury history who can separate over the guy who's a little bit more of a gadget guy with a little bit more of an injury history. That is how I expect this to play out for the 49ers, that if somebody moves here, it's going to be Deebo and not Ayuk. However, San Francisco has the leverage here. They can sit here and say, we're not touching anything. You are all going to play for us this year, and we're going to figure it out after that. After all, they were just in the Super Bowl. This is their window. And, if you trade Deebo Samuel, you might get, third-round pick back? Fourth-round pick, something like that, probably at this point, maybe a second if you really get a good deal from somebody. You're going to take a day 2, day 3 pick next year, 2 years from now, over having a guy who could be a really, really elite receiver in your scheme, in your Super Bowl window? Probably not. So I think that's what San Francisco does. I think they're going to hold on to all these guys through this season and figure things out next offseason. Maybe try to trade Deebo Samuel next year after the season and sign Brandon Ayuk then. What does that mean for New England? First of all, let's talk about what Brandon Ayuk could look like in New England's scheme. Because you can put him in a lot of different spots on the field. When in Alex Van Pelt's offense, when they spread the ball, when they like to go spread on third down passing situations, I think you can line him up in any spot on the field. But one thing the Browns did pretty consistently with both Amari Cooper and then also David Njoku, those were two guys who were matchup issues for defenses. So the Browns would put 3 receivers to one side and I put either Amari Cooper or David Njoku on the backside of the play, basically guaranteeing a one-on-one with whatever defender is there. And that worked pretty well for them. Amari Cooper is a very good receiver. David Njoku, if you match him up against the safety, did a pretty good job there. And schematically, what that means is that for the quarterback on the front side, the side where you have 3 receivers, you're going to have some kind of a scheme play. You're trying to beat a coverage. You're trying to attack a weakness about a defense. You're going to have these guys working off one another. And the other side is there's going to be a one-on-one betting your man can win. And when you line up this way, you create clarity for a young quarterback, if it's going to be Drake May in there or any quarterback in there. And he can kind of decide before the play starts, based on what the defense has given him, which side he's going to attack. If you called some kind of a cover 2 beater on your front side of a play and the defense is showing you cover 2, all right, before the snap, you're going to know I'm probably going to my right here. That's where that is, and that's where the ball is going to go. Versus if they don't give you the defense that you're hoping for, you can say, all right, well, I have my one-on-one option. I have my get-out-of-jail-free card in this receiver I can go to and hit him, and he's going to win. That was Amari Cooper for the Browns. That could be Brandon Ayuk in this scheme. And, I talk about how good of a receiver he is. Just to put some numbers to this, he had the second highest PFF offensive grade and receiving grade by any wide receiver last season. And he was ESPN's highest graded receiver in their metric, and he had the highest receiver catch grade. So, that's a pretty good thing to have when your job is catching the ball. You want to be good at that, which he is. According to Next Gen Stats, he was 12th in average air yards targeted last year, 14.1 yards down the field. So he can stretch the field, and that's almost identical to Amari Cooper's number, I think, of 14 yards. So again, he fits in that role of what I think New England would want. And when you look at the way what allows you to do with your other receivers, Brandon Ayuk is your X receiver, and he's going to be drawing press coverage when defenses want to bring that, and he's going to be getting top man corners. That means that your young pair of Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, they're going to be seeing corner 2, corner 3, and they're going to be getting advantageous scheme stuff to work against. It means that Pop Douglas can line up full-time in the slot and really excel there. It means that Kendrick Bourne is a guy who can kind of go back to being a jack of all trades, where you can line him up anywhere and use him as a scheme guy and get the ball in his hands in space, where I think he is at his best, where he can be a big play guy. So he would really, really help you if the Patriots can get him. Now, if he can get him, that kind of becomes the issue here. You got to talk about price tag. First of all, Brandon Ayuk is going to come with a financial price tag. He's going to need a contract extension. It's going to be quite a lot of money. I don't know if it's going to be Justin Jefferson money, but he's going to want something, if it's not in that tier, a half tier down from that. So you got to be willing to pony it up. The Patriots have that money. I think Brandon Ayuk is worth it, but you have to know that we're committing a lot financially to this player if he comes in. Trade package. It's going to have to include a first-round pick. And that's why I talked about what's in it for San Francisco leading into this whole segment, is that they don't want to trade him. He's a really good player. He's young, and they can find a way to extend him after this season. If he wants to hold out this year, he'll get a huge financial penalty for it. And I don't think his contract will toll, so I think he'd have to come back for another year. I have to double check on that. But the NFL really cracked down on your ability to hold out as a negotiating tool, and Brandon Ayuk can request a trade all he wants. If the team doesn't want to trade him, they really don't have to, the way this plays out. So you have to make it worth it for San Francisco. That's going to start with a first-round pick. And if we look at some recent trades that have happened, when Tyreek Hill got traded, that wasn't just a first. That included a second-round pick as well, and a smattering of day 3 picks on top of that. When Devontae Adams got traded, and that was somebody who really wanted out, that included a first and a second in that trade. So if you're New England, you are probably giving up next year's first and second round picks plus, I don't know, $100 million guaranteed, maybe, to go get Brandon Ayuk. I think that is worth it for the caliber of player Brandon Ayuk is. Is it worth it for where New England is right now with this team? Let's think about where these picks are going to fall in the draft. So we'll start with that first round pick right off the bat. Right now, that if you look at projections, that's going to be a top 5 pick. You add Brandon Ayuk, that's going to change. It's not going to be a top 5 pick, at least in all likelihood, unless things go seriously wrong. But you can add Brandon Ayuk and still not be a playoff team. That pick could be a top 12, top 15 pick pretty easily, which I think is hard to give up. That's tough. If you're also adding a second round pick on top of that, if you're a team that is not making the playoffs, that's going to be a top 50 pick. Do you want to give up 2 top 50 picks? I'm not entirely opposed to it. I think Brandon Ayuk is that caliber of player. But think about players who could be on the board then. We spent the whole offseason talking about New England's offensive line. The only real way to fix that is by drafting a guy high in the draft reliably. You can find steals to the offensive line, and you can, try to trade for somebody, find somebody in free agency. But the simplest way, the most trusted way to find a top tackle, take somebody in the first round of the draft. That's your straightforward path. With the offensive line like this, if you are going to be giving up your first rounder, you are basically kicking the can on seriously addressing your tackle spot until the 2026 draft, barring some kind of miracle free agency or trade or development thing happening between now and then, which is a massive, massive risk to undertake. So as much as I want Brandon Ayuk, I don't know if I can, I'd be excited if he's on the team. I think that might be too much risk for where New England is right now. Now, I mentioned Devontae Adams in there. I did think it was interesting that I think Pretty Ricky is the name of the account. It's an anonymous Twitter account that has gotten some things correct this offseason. So has some kind of cachet here. And this account is talking about a possible Vegas trade here where Brandon Ayuk ends up in Las Vegas and Devontae Adams would go back to San Francisco, which I think is very interesting. And I think that's something that the 49ers might consider because it keeps their window open here. But if I really had to bet on this, I don't think he's actually going to get traded. I think there's going to be a lot of noise around this, but I don't think this is going to materialize into anything this season. And I think we'll probably see a frustrated Brandon Ayuk having to play for the 49ers this year, and we'll see what happens next offseason. That is my read on that situation as we sit here on July 17th. A lot can change. Things can change very quickly in the NFL, but that's where we are now. We're going to take a quick break for a sponsor, but after that, I want to get into 5 storylines to watch here as training camp starts. We're a week away from training camp. I want to focus on early training camp stuff too. I'm not looking at big picture at the whole of training camp, but a little bit more micro targeted about things that I want to see, in that first week, the first 10 days, your first couple practices, and then when you start to get the pads on. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about after a quick break. So just do the ad read here. Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. This week, I have Bryce Harper for more than 2.5 bases and Jose Ramirez for more than 1.5 bases. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Before you then do this, I had one other stat on Brandon Ayuk. I just wanted to get out of the way here. We'll talk about how good he is. 4 years in the NFL. Brandon Ayuk has 3,931 career receiving yards. The last Patriot to have at least that many receiving yards in a 4-season stretch with the team, you have to go back to Wes Welker, 2009 to 2012. It's the last guy to do it. Gronk had a stretch in there where he came very close to doing it. I think it was within 10 yards or so, which is pretty impressive considering he's won a tight end into a guy that missed a lot of time in that span. But yeah, I think that tells you the quality of the receiver that could be on the market here. If Brandon Ayuk were to come to New England, he is the best receiver New England's had since at least Brandon Cooks, at least Wes Welker, potentially Randy Moss. That's where we're going back to. He's not as good as Randy Moss, obviously, but he's probably closer to that than Brandon Cooks with the way he's been able to produce in the league and at his age, and his ability to stay on the field. He's a bigger guy, so yeah, would be a great fit in the scheme. Guy who could help in the running game, stay on the field all the time, do everything you want for a receiver. I would love to see him in New England. The price tag it's going to take, I think it might be a little bit rough, but yeah. All right, we're going to do our 5 storylines to watch here in the first week of camp. And I mean, this first one is not going to be a surprise to anyone. It's the progression of Drake May. You used the number 3 pick on him. He looked great at points coming into this, over the summer with workouts. Now this is when things start to get real. I think there's a couple of things you want to watch here with the progression of Drake May. The first thing is going to be how many reps is he getting? It's he and Jacoby Brissett have been straight up splitting reps points before this. Does that stay the same? Is that the way they're going to be doing things first week of camp? Are they going to ease him in with, maybe a lower share to start? Is it possible that they liked what they saw in minicamp so much that they're going to come out here and have him kind of lead things off and make it look like he's the number 1 quarterback on the depth chart? You have to watch this. And this is something, day by day. If he comes out the first 3 days and is just lighting it up, on day 4? Do they give him a little bit of a promotion? Do they give him more reps? Do they have him jump Jacoby in the lineup at any point? That's the first thing you got to watch. The second thing, obviously, is the quality of the reps that he's getting. And this is kind of a two-pronged thing. One, it's going to be who's he going against, who's he playing with, what's his supporting cast look like when he's out there. Number 2 part of that is what does he do with that. So, if they have Drake May getting a lot of reps out there and getting a lot of work, but he's working with the number 2 offensive line and the number 2 receivers against the number 2 defense, that's a very different scenario than if they're making sure that both he and Brissett are getting real reps with the top offense against the top defense. So monitoring that and the way that changes throughout camp, especially in the first week, because that's where you set the tone for everything, is going to be huge for May. And if he can kind of earn promotions to get harder work against harder defenses, that's what you want to see. It's why you use a number 3 pick on him, because you obviously believe that he is more than capable of doing that. And then it's how does he actually look when he's out there? If he's going against the number 2 defense, can he shred them like he's capable of doing? Can he go out there and light people up and make plays that make you say, wow? Especially at the end of this first week when they start to get pads on. Is he intimidated by the pass rush? That'll be a big factor here, especially with this offensive line. Does that shake him, or does he stay in there? Does he keep his mechanics, some of the new stuff they're training with him? Does he start to lose some of that when he's under pressure? The coaches are going to be keeping an eye on that, because how you handle pressure, how you handle that adversity is a huge sign for whether or not the coaches are going to trust putting you into the game. And if he comes in day 1 of camp and probably not day 1, but day 1 with pads and rushers are in his face and he's making plays, that's going to do a lot towards getting him to start on the earlier end of things, versus if he goes out there and it's the number 2 defense and they're getting pressure in his face and he's looking rattled and he throws a couple picks or throws balls really far off target, the hype train's going to slow down a little bit. So this is where we're setting the tone for all of camp and the lead up to the first preseason game, where we'll finally get to see these guys for real. And then, we talk about his ability to play with the ones. Is he building chemistry with anyone? Are there any targets he's really working with well? And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of this stuff after. And then one of my later points here, one of my later storylines to watch, but building chemistry with other young players is a big part of your development and what they're going for here. That's why you draft 2 receivers and a tight end with him. That is going to be the top storyline every single week of camp until we, have an answer about who's going to start, or until, we get some kind of solid information here. And if Drake May isn't the starter, and this is going to be a storyline that will follow the team until eventually he does get the opportunity to start, which he will either this season or next season. There's no way by this point next year he isn't getting the opportunity to start. That's your top storyline as we head into camp a week out from it. And, you think back to Mac Jones and how when he came into New England, he was able to tear it up at points in camp. It especially grew as camp went on. You're going to be looking for that kind of trajectory from Drake May, a guy who was seen as a better prospect, a guy who was taken higher in the draft. That's what, obviously Mac Jones didn't work out, but he looked great in training camp. So you're hoping to see Drake May do something similar. Number 2 storyline, we're going to set a baseline for what this offensive line is going to look like. This is the rotation. It's going to be a big part of this. Who do they have at each of the spots? What's the health status of Cole Strange? I don't think anyone is expecting him to be, a full go next week. But if he's out there and able to rehab, I think that would be fantastic. You want as many bodies as you can get out there. But we're going to start to get an idea in the first week who they think the top 5 are on the offensive line, who they think should be starting. And setting that baseline will help us evaluate things as training camp goes on. From there, it's about how these guys perform. So, we can go ahead and take a look at this offensive line right now. At left tackle, we're talking about Choksa Okorafor. He's making a transition over to left tackle. Watching that and his ability to, switch his technique from the right side to the left side and play a little bit on an island as a pass protector out there is going to be huge. We're not really going to get to see that before pads come on, but then as pads come on at the end of the first week, how does he look as a pass protector in that role? Does he actually look comfortable? We haven't gotten a good read on that so far during this offseason. We will start to have some answers for that in the next week or two. Left guard. Right now, it seems like Sidy Sow is probably going to be the guy there with Cole Strange injured. He's a guy who played excellently as a run blocker last year, up and down as a pass blocker. So I think you start for him with the run blocking is how does that adjust to a new offensive line coach and a new offensive line blocking scheme? They're going to do a lot more outside zone this year. How does he handle that? This is something that was run blocking was a strength of his game. Can it remain a strength of his game in a new scheme? And then from there, in year 2, can he develop as a pass blocker? Can he take a next step? He's going back to his kind of natural side there on the left side, which I think you would hope would help him. But right now, we're looking at your day one offensive line. Both guys on the left side are players who are making a position switch from last year. That's probably going to come with some bumps. So seeing where we are the first week of camp, how much improvement has to happen between July 24th and early September when they're heading to Cincinnati to open the season. Center David Andrews seems like he's as steady as they come there. He did start to show his age a little bit last year, so you just want to make sure that he is still the David Andrews that we know and love. And then right guard, this is where things get really interesting. Nick Leverett has been repping there at points. Mike Onwenu has been kicking inside at points. So who do they have as the starting right guard right now? I think that will kind of answer some questions for us from minicamp of the evaluations coming out of that and what they saw, the coaches saw from minicamp. We'll get a big answer there, a big tell on how they view Caden Wallace as a right tackle, how they view Nick Leverett as a guard, and how they view Mike Onwenu, the big man with big new money coming back to New England here. And, if you go to right tackle, is it, again, Mike Onwenu? Is it Caden Wallace? We're going to learn a lot right there. And because we got a couple rookies in this mix, not a couple, Caden Wallace is a rookie. Layden Robinson also is a rookie following their development in this. Where are they at this point in their careers? And with that, some of the young guys from last year, I mentioned Sidy Sow, Antonio Mafi is in this conversation. Jake Andrews is in this conversation. These are all guys who were drafted as part of an old regime with a different offensive line coach. It's a new scheme now. It's a new offensive line coach. It's a new offensive coordinator. It's a new head coach. And, Sidy Sow, I think, played well. He should feel good about where he is. The other two are not guaranteed jobs. They're not guaranteed a spot on this roster after training camp. So they're going to be out there trying to earn it. That backup center job, there's an opportunity there for Jake Andrews and Antonio Mafi, who apparently was also repping there at points. There's a guard spot open right now with Cole Strange injured. Can somebody step up and take it? That goes for some of the other guys on the offensive line too. Michael Jordan, the guard that they had brought in. You got Charles Turner, who is an undrafted free agent that they brought in who can play on the inside. And Liam Fornadell is one other guy that they added on the interior. And then, getting away from the interior of the line for a second, I want to go back to the tackle spots. How's the depth there? This is an area that was a real weakness last year, in large part due to injuries. Calvin Anderson, finally healthy. Guy who was a good swing tackle for Denver. Can he return to that form? If he plays as well for New England as he did in Denver, I think he could potentially push for that starting left tackle job too. We'll see if he's able to get back to that. He might be more comfortable as a swing tackle, but you never know how these things are going to play out. I don't think it would happen, but is there a world where Onwenu comes into guard and they're going to kick Okorafor back over to right tackle where he's most comfortable and Calvin Anderson's going to be your left tackle? I highly doubt it, but weird things happen in camp. So, Calvin Anderson is a guy they obviously liked last year. Can they get anything out of him? Darian Lowe, they brought in last year. He struggled at points, but, another year of growth for him. Tyrone Wheatley Jr., who never played for them last year, who they also brought in the Pierre Strong trade. Can they get anything out of him? And then you have an undrafted free agent in Zuri Henry down the depth chart. That's a tough spot to break in as an undrafted free agent, but with the state of the depth of this line, there is an opportunity for a job to be won. You're not going to get the starting job. I highly doubt that. But you can win a backup job against some of these guys. So the way that competition starts to unfold in the first week, we'll know in 10 days what the coach's initial thoughts are on everybody, and then that can set us up for the rest of training camp and how we think these battles are going to play out. I'm going to do one more of these storylines, and then we're going to hit one more commercial break here. But as the question that we've been asking in New England since Brandon Cooks left, essentially, and since Julian Edelman retired, can anyone separate? What's going on with the receivers? Can anyone give you anything? I think Kendrick Bourne still going to be rehabbing, so this is a big opportunity for some younger players to show that they belong on this roster. There are jobs to be won here. There are roster spots open for any receiver who can show you anything. I think at the top, you're going to start with the two rookies and Polk and Baker. We're going to get an idea of how good they are at this point and what they can really do. Polk had some moments there in minicamp. Hopefully here with, the whole team getting together, they should get some reps against the top defense, which will be great competition for them. And hopefully that's something they can grow with, and they can start to look like the guys that were taken where they were. Pop Douglas is a guy who is looking to build in year 2. He's a guy who looked great in minicamp. Can he continue that, especially once the pads come on as an undersized guy? Talk about the pads coming on. Tyquan Thornton, a guy who has looked very fast out there when there's no pads, and he's been able to create separation. Then can he? Keep asking this question. Can he do it again? Can he actually, do all of that, but when the pads come on and stay healthy for it? We haven't seen it yet. It's year 3, the year that finally happens for him. And then, you go down the depth chart a little bit. Kayshon Boutte, a guy who was facing gambling charges. Those have since been dismissed, which is a big story for him. He had a couple moments in minicamp. He was a very talented receiver coming out of high school. Showed some real nice stuff for LSU before getting hurt and having some issues with his rehab, which took him a long time to get back to full strength. This is where you got to put it all together. Kayshon Boutte can start to look like that guy he was at LSU. He will earn a roster spot. There's a spot for him. Can he actually do it? There's going to be chances early in camp here, I think, because this depth chart is so flat at receiver. All the receivers are going to get opportunities. Can you make the most of that? And that's talking about the young guys. You got older guys here too. You got Jalen Reagor, who had some decent moments, more so on special teams, but some decent moments for the team last year. You got KJ Osborne, who has been a very useful receiver in the NFL, who I think is, expected to make this roster, but his contract doesn't guarantee him a spot. Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy who, it's hard to believe is less than 2 years removed from being number 1 wide receiver and the number 2 offensive option on a team that won the Super Bowl. Where did that Juju go? If he can give you anything, that I think would be a help at this point. And then you go down to the very bottom of the depth chart. Jaquay Jackson, David Wallace, a pair of undrafted free agents there. Wallace is a slot guy who looks shifty at points. And you got Kawan Baker, who's kind of bounced around. I don't expect much of any of those, but like I said at offensive tackle, there's spots to be earned at receiver. The depth here has been an area of weakness, and if you're a receiver who shows something, you're going to get an opportunity to prove it and, make this roster out of camp. So getting a strong impression early on could be huge for making that happen. I see Matt Manito is here. I see Thad Skywalker's here. MA Football, Scott, love it. We got some of the usual cast here. I know different time, different night right now with the schedule being a little bit weird over the summer. Pat on vacation, but we're here doing some Pat's content for you. We do a quick ad break and then come back with my last 2 big storylines to watch. Plus, I got a bonus one I'll throw in. I had to. But hey. Nothing beats the smell of freshly cooked hot dogs and the sounds of baseball on a warm summer day, and Game Time can help you get out to the ballpark faster and easier than ever this summer. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. With the Game Time app, you can head over to Fenway to see the Red Sox host the Yankees at the end of July. That'll be a big series coming out of the All-Star break here. Tickets with the best value are even pointed out on the map for you to make getting the best seats even easier. Thanks to last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% on tickets right before first pitch. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Definitely go use that. Jarren Duran, the All-Star MVP. The Red Sox are red hot right now. Or if you're not a Red Sox fan, you're a fan of somebody else, go use Game Time and get tickets a little bit cheaper on us here at CLNS. All right, let's get back to some Patriots training camp talk. We got two more points, two more things that I'm looking for here. Storylines that I'm watching the first week of camp. This is one that Pat and I have talked about quite a bit the last couple weeks, and I think it's a story that's going under the radar, but could become a big thing, and that's what does the cornerback rotation look like on this team? Your number one spot should be locked up by Christian Gonzalez. You would expect the number two spot to be locked up by Jonathan Jones. After that, it's kind of a free-for-all. The corners that they have on this roster, you've got Austin Alex, you've got Marco Wilson, you've got Isaiah Bolden, you've got Marcellus Dial, you've got Sean Wade, you've got Mikey Victor, you've got Azizi Hearn, you've got Caleb Ford Dement. Some of those are undrafted free agents, but they got a rookie at Marcellus Dial who's going to be vying for a spot. Isaiah Bolden was a day 3 pick last year who had some flashes during camp. Sean Wade is a guy who played well for them when asked to play last year. I realized I forgot Marcus Jones, I think, in that list. So Marcus Jones as well, guy who was a 3rd-round pick in 2022 and an all-pro on special teams, a guy who, he's looked good on defense, was injured last year, and you think he's going to be the top dog for that third corner spot, but this is not a guarantee. Alex Austin gave them some really good snaps last year. He played well in that Buffalo game, and as part of the crew on defense, he seemed to buy into his role pretty quickly and understand what was going on. Marco Wilson is a guy who's bounced around the league a little, but he clearly has talent. And even some of the undrafted free agents are guys who we heard them have some good moments during mini camp. So I want to see what this rotation actually looks like. To start, we got TJ in the chat. Says, I wonder what the future holds for Sean Wade. He's held his water at times. I agree, TJ. I think Sean Wade is a guy who I was initially skeptical of, and I think at points in his past has been a guy where you put him on the field and it just seems like bad things happen. I forget which game it was, but there was one game, I think in 2022, where he only played one snap. I think he only played one snap, and he was targeted on that one snap, and it was a touchdown, and that was it for him. And I thought Wade played much better last year compared to that. The guy who has talent, he was heading into that draft. He was projected as a 1st-round pick, had a little bit of a position change in the Ohio State defense, had a rough time, falls, goes to Baltimore, played really well in the preseason, but they don't have a roster spot for him, so they end up trading him to New England, and he's kind of just been on the periphery of the roster ever since then. So if he can find a way to be a contributor, I think that would be huge, and he's earned the right to be in this conversation. But even just the order of how these guys are going to line up when they go with their base nickel defense out there, who is the third corner and where does he line up, I think is another thing. Marcus Jones, despite his size, is I think a little bit better as an outside corner than an inside corner. And does that mean that, is your starting defense going to look like Jonathan Jones in the slot, Christian Gonzalez outside, and Marcus Jones on the outside on the other side? Are they going to do, are they going to do something like that, both Alex Austin on the outside? We saw Isaiah Bolden playing in the slot in mini camp. Is that something that they are going to try out here? Isaiah Bolden in the slot with Gonzalez and Jonathan Jones outside. How they rotate that third spot, I think, is going to be big. When they go 4 corners, what does that look like? And then obviously, who gets left out as we filter things down? Where do players line up? because you're probably going to have 5 or 6 corners making this team. And if you want to be corner 5 or corner 6 on this roster, I think you're going to have to play special teams very well as well, which is a big nod in favor of Isaiah Bolden. That's an area where I think he's played well. Marcus Jones obviously is excellent on special teams. He's making this roster for that, even if he isn't good at the other stuff. Marcellus Dial has the body type to be excellent on special teams. Sean Wade has played special teams. You got a lot of guys who can contribute there. Alex Austin, Marco Wilson. So, part of that corner rotation is going to be monitoring which guys play in the special teams units, how they play there as we start to sort out this battle. But we're definitely going to be watching that rotation. And then my last point here, it's the kicker battle. Yeah, first week of camp. Let's talk about a kicker battle. Chad Ryland, obviously, outside of an amazing kick in Denver on Christmas Eve, has been underwhelming, I think would be the kindest way to describe his performance. Last year, he has been up and down in minicamp, it sounds like. So, the Patriots might not have their opening day kicker on the roster right now, because right now it's Chad Ryland and Joey Sly. Those are your two guys. Ryland is, he's going to have to earn this with how he performed last year. Joey Sly is not some, high-level NFL kicker either. So how do these two look? What is the status of the kicker competition? Do they both come in and play well? How do we see some development from Ryland, some veteran experience from Sly? Does one of those guys clearly look like the better kicker? Does one of these guys look like an NFL kicker and the other one doesn't? And then obviously kind of the nightmare scenario is if neither of these guys look very good. If they don't feel like they can rely on either one, and it's late July, and you are still searching for a kicker. That's not a situation you really want to be in, but if that's where they are, you're going to start to find that out, I think, early with these two guys. I'll be watching that. Those are my top 5 storylines as we count down the final week to camp. I'll throw in one last one before wrapping up the show here. And that's just a general watching the undrafted free agents. There's always at least 1 or 2 guys in that group who, try to give you a real shot at making the roster. I think it's going to be tougher this year because, we got a lot of rookies, got a lot of young guys from last year. Not going to be as many spots, I don't think, for an undrafted free agent, but can some of these guys do something? Jonathan Russell is a name I'm looking at from the international player pathway. If he's a rugby convert, he's a big dude, 6'4", only 239 pounds, a little bit undersized for a defensive end, right, where he's listed. But guy with a rugby background who is that size, I imagine would be an excellent special teamer. So I think when you look at undrafted free agents, that's the guy I'm looking at. Is he good enough at something? Does he show you enough to be worth keeping around as a developmental player? I think that could be a really, really fun story for this team. I think you got some undrafted free agents at running back too. Deshaun Fenwick, Terrell Jennings, who will have the opportunity to battle for some roster spots. And depth at linebacker and corner. Caleb Ford Dement, Del Pettis at safety, Mikey Victor at corner. And Steel Chambers, a great name at linebacker, and John Troy Hunter was an undrafted free agent people liked as well. So some of the names to watch there as we look at the undrafted free agents. And, do we have a new streak that starts in the Elliott Wolf, Gerard Mayo reign? But I think that's going to do it for tonight's episode. That's where I'm at on July 17th. I'm going to be back tomorrow night with another live show. We got a fun guest coming on. We're actually going to be talking about the new kickoff rules in the NFL, breaking that down. So be on the lookout for that. Pat will be back next week, and we'll be ramping right up to the season from there. Things are going to move pretty quickly. And the next thing you know, week 1 will be here, and I cannot wait. I am Matt St. Jean. This has been the Patriot Nation podcast, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.